She had always lived as if life were a straight line, predictable, safe, without curves or detours. Until the night when an improbable impulse changed everything. A hurried kiss, an escape from herself, and destiny decided to toy with her certainties. What was supposed to be just a fleeting mistake would become the turning point of two opposite lives. Hers, shaped by the fear of taking risks, and his, built on absolute control. Neither of them imagined that that kiss would be just the beginning. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Sarah had never broken rules. Since childhood, she followed her parents' instructions to the letter, meeting every expectation with the precision of a Swiss watch. She grew up believing that life was a series of cautious steps, each calculated to avoid disappointments. Maybe that's why, at 32, she felt as if she was observing her own existence from afar, like watching a bland movie where nothing extraordinary happens. A fine rain was falling when she arrived at the Bellagio restaurant, a place too pretentious for her taste. The yellowish lights reflected on the beige walls, while waiters glided between tables with the rehearsed elegance of those serving dishes whose value equated to the rent of her small apartment. "It's just a dinner," she repeated in her mind, adjusting the navy blue dress she had bought especially for the occasion. She had no real hopes for that blind date, but Jennifer, her college friend, had insisted so much that refusing had become more exhausting than accepting. "Are you Sarah?" A man in a grey blazer with an excessively bright smile extended his hand. "I'm Derek. Jennifer told me a lot about you." Sarah tried to smile naturally. The man had small, restless eyes that seemed to evaluate everything around as if calculating values. She felt a knot in her stomach, that intuition that was rarely wrong. Still, she decided to give it a chance. It didn't take long for her to realize that the meeting would be longer than any tedious work meeting she had ever faced. Derek talked incessantly about himself, his imported car, his trips to exclusive destinations, his important connections. In 20 minutes, Sarah knew details about his investments, but nothing about who he really was. "I've never told anyone this," he commented, leaning in as if confiding a universal secret. "But I was born for success. Ordinary people don't understand what it's like to have a vision like mine." She nodded politely while calculating how many minutes would be socially acceptable before she could invent an excuse to leave. The wine in her glass, which should have been exceptional given the price, tasted like an obligation. "And you?" he finally asked after 45 minutes talking about himself. "What is it that you do again?" "I'm a communications analyst. I work with strategies for—" "Ah, communication," he interrupted. "I have a friend who owns an agency. Maybe I can introduce him to you. He always says I should write a book about my negotiation strategies." Sarah felt something wither inside her. There was a time when she dreamed of encounters where conversations would flow like rivers, where glances would mean more than words. Now she was there, stuck in a monologue, holding an artificial smile that already hurt the corners of her mouth. When Derek reached out and touched her hand across the table, she felt an uncomfortable shiver. There was no warmth in that touch, just a presumptuous confidence, as if he already considered it a done deal. "I need to go to the bathroom, give me a minute," she said, abruptly standing up. In the elegant restroom of the restaurant, Sarah stared at her reflection in the mirror. She recognized that look, the same one she had as a child, obeying rules that suffocated her, the same as when she accepted a safe job instead of risking her dream career. The look of someone who always chooses the familiar path, even if it leads nowhere. "Enough," she thought, tucking her brown hair behind her ears. "I can't waste another night of my life for the sake of politeness." She returned to the table determined to end the meeting. She invented an emergency at work, a flimsy excuse that even she wouldn't believe. "Leaving already?" Derek seemed genuinely surprised, as if he couldn't conceive that someone would want to escape his company. "I'll walk you to the door then." Before she could protest, he was already by her side, placing his hand on her back in a possessive manner. He paid the bill with exaggeratedly expansive gestures, making a point to comment to the waiter about the generous tip. As they stepped out onto the sidewalk, the fresh spring night air was a blessing. Sarah took a deep breath, already thinking about the comfort of the sofa and the episode of the series she had left halfway through. But Derek kept talking, now about a real estate project, while accompanying her towards the main street. "I really need to go," she tried, stopping at the corner. "Let me call a taxi for you," he insisted, taking a step towards her. It was when she saw him. A tall man, impeccably dressed in a dark suit that seemed custom-made just for him. He was standing under the streetlight, absorbed in his cell phone, his brow slightly furrowed as if solving complex problems in silence. There was something in his posture that conveyed authority, and at the same time, a kind of contained loneliness. Sarah didn't think. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time in her life, she acted on pure impulse. She walked up to the stranger with quick and determined steps. He lifted his eyes from the phone, noticing her approach. For a second, their gazes met, blue-grey eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "I'm sorry about this," she whispered, and before reason could catch up with her, she placed her hands on his face and kissed him. Time stopped. The world around them disappeared. The kiss, which was supposed to be just a quick act, turned into something more. There was warmth. There was surprise. There was an inexplicable connection that made her heart race as if recognizing something long lost. When she stepped away, she saw the man looking at her in astonishment, his eyebrows raised in a silent question. Behind her, Derek watched the scene, open-mouthed, before mumbling something and finally moving away. "Thank you," she murmured to the stranger, feeling her face burn with embarrassment. "Sorry for the... I just needed to..." Unable to complete the explanation, she turned her back and walked quickly down the street, her heart still pounding in her chest, the feeling of his lips still present on hers like an invisible mark. That night, Sarah slept with thoughts of the stranger's kiss. Even she couldn't explain why she had done it. Maybe so Derek would never think of getting close to her again. In the following days, she tried to convince herself that it had been just a moment of fleeting madness, something to tell and laugh about years later. But the truth is that that brief contact had awoken something dormant inside her, a hunger for authenticity that no safe routine could satisfy. Meanwhile, Adrian Cole watched the city through the massive glass panel of his office in the penthouse. Below, tiny people went about their lives, unaware that they were being observed by the man many considered one of the most powerful in the country. At 38, Adrian was the CEO of Coal Industries, a conglomerate his father had built from scratch and which he had turned into an even greater empire. From the outside, his life was the epitome of success. Wealth, power, respect. Businessweek magazine had recently called him the modern King Midas. Everything he touched turned to gold. But as he contemplated the sunset painting the horizon orange, Adrian felt only the familiar emptiness that had accompanied him for years, an emptiness that not even the latest billion-dollar contract could fill. "Mr. Cole, the merger documents have been sent and Miss Westfield called to confirm the dinner with her parents tomorrow," announced his assistant, interrupting his thoughts. "Thank you, Caroline. You can go, it's late already." When he was alone, Adrian took the small velvet box out of his drawer. Inside, a diamond ring carefully chosen by a renowned jeweller. In 2 weeks, he would place it on Victoria Westfield's finger, consolidating not just a marriage but an alliance between two powerful families. His father would be proud. "Business first, always," he used to say. The marriage to Victoria made sense in every practical aspect. She was elegant, intelligent, came from a family with valuable political connections. They shared the same social circle, the same ambitions. It was the logical choice. There was only one problem. Adrian did not love her. He respected her, admired her intelligence, and enjoyed her company. But love? that uncontrolled emotion that made people make irrational decisions. No, that was never part of the plan. His father always said that love was a luxury that men in his position could not afford. Business was about control, and feelings were too unpredictable. Adrian closed the box and returned it to the drawer. The feeling that he was just following a pre-written script bothered him more and more. And then, like a stubborn ghost, the memory of that night returned to his mind. The unknown woman, the unexpected kiss. It had been a week, and he still couldn't forget it. There was something about that impulsive gesture that haunted him. Authenticity, perhaps. There was no calculation in that kiss, just human urgency, real. Adrian shook his head, trying to dispel the memory. A coincidence, a mistake, an unimportant moment. Nothing that should alter the carefully plotted course of his life. The first day at Coal Industries left Sarah as nervous as she hadn't felt since college. The imposing glass and steel building stood in the financial centre, like a monument to corporate power. As she passed through the revolving doors, she felt small, insignificant. But she needed that job. After years of working at an agency that had unexpectedly closed, the opportunity at Coal Industries represented not just a better salary, but a professional restart. Even though the interview had been conducted solely by the Human Resources Department, without any contact with the board, she knew about the company's reputation and the demands of its legendary CEO. After a brief orientation, she was led to a large meeting room where the new employees would be introduced to the team. She chose a discreet spot in the back row, clutching her folder with documents like a talisman. The room gradually filled with executives in impeccable suits and women in stylish blazers. Polite conversations flowed around her, but Sarah remained quiet, observing, trying to absorb the dynamics of this new environment. "Attention, please," announced a middle-aged woman with a severe bun. "Mr. Cole is here to welcome us." The chatter ceased instantly. All eyes turned to the door. And then he entered. Sarah felt the air escape from her lungs. It was him, the man from the kiss, the stranger from the sidewalk. But he wasn't just any stranger. He was Adrian Cole, the CEO, her new boss. The blood drained from her face as she watched, paralyzed, as he walked to the front of the room with the same confident posture she had noticed that night. He was wearing an impeccable graphite suit, and his eyes seemed even more intense under the fluorescent room light. "Welcome to Coal Industries," he began, his voice deep and controlled. "I hope everyone—" That was when his eyes scanned the room and met hers. Time seemed to freeze again. For a fleeting moment, Sarah saw something pass across his face. Surprise, recognition. The sentence hung in the air for 2-3 seconds. No one else seemed to notice, but for her it was as if an abyss had opened beneath her feet. He recognized her. She was sure. Adrian quickly recovered, continuing his speech with the same confidence as before. He talked about the company's culture, values, expectations, but his eyes, every so often, turned in her direction, as if he needed to confirm he wasn't imagining things. When the meeting ended, Sarah remained seated, unable to move. People were dispersing, but she felt as if her feet were cemented to the floor. "I kissed the CEO. I kissed Adrian Cole." The revelation hit her like an avalanche. Of all the people in that city, of all the men she could have chosen for her impulsive act, she had chosen the one person who now had power over her professional future. The following days were an exercise in self-control. Sarah immersed herself in work, trying to be invisible, efficient, impeccable. Maybe if she proved her professional worth, the incident would be forgotten. Or maybe he hadn't really recognized her. Maybe it was just her paranoia. But she knew it wasn't. In department meetings, she felt his gaze upon her. It wasn't an invasive or intimidating look. It was curious, contemplative, as if he were trying to decipher a particularly complex enigma. Adrian, in turn, found himself inexplicably fascinated by this woman who had broken all the rules of corporate behavior even before being hired. He watched her work with quiet dedication, without the calculated gestures of self-promotion so common in that environment. There was an authenticity in her that contrasted with the artificial world he lived in. On a rainy Friday, 3 weeks after her hiring, Sarah received a call that made her freeze. Mr. Cole requested her presence in his office, immediately. The journey to the top floor in the exclusive elevator seemed endless. Upon reaching the spacious office, she found him standing, watching the rain through the window. The city looked small from that height. "Miss Baker," he said, turning to face her, "thank you for coming." "Mr. Cole," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. There was a moment of silence filled only by the sound of rain against the glass. Finally, he pointed to a chair. "Please, have a seat. I need your professional opinion on an important presentation." The meeting proceeded with surprising normality. Adrian discussed aspects of the communication strategy for a new project, listening carefully to her suggestions and asking pertinent questions. No mention of the kiss, no reference to the unexpected encounter. When they finished, he walked her to the door. At the last moment, as she was about to leave, he spoke. "Sarah, it was the first time he used her first name. Why did you do that?" She stopped, feeling her heart race. She didn't need to ask what he was referring to. "I was running away from a terrible date," she replied honestly, turning to face him. "It was impulsive and completely inappropriate. I apologize." Adrian watched her for a long moment. "You know what's strange?" he said with a slight smile. "I had never done anything impulsive in my life until I responded to that kiss." Sarah felt her face burn, but she held his gaze. "We are two sensible people, then," she replied, trying to ease the tension. "Let's just move on, okay?" He nodded slowly, but something in his eyes said that conversation was far from over. During the wedding week, Adrian felt suffocated under the weight of expectations. The rehearsal dinner at the city's most exclusive restaurant seemed like a play where everyone except him knew their lines. Victoria was animatedly discussing reception details with her mother, while her future father-in-law talked politics with his dad. "And then the honeymoon will be in the Maldives, 2 weeks. Adrian finally managed to take a vacation," Victoria was saying, holding his arm possessively. He automatically smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Sarah, about how she discreetly smiled at her colleagues during lunch. He thought about the kiss, the spontaneity of that moment that had cracked the perfect facade of his organized life. "Are you okay?" Victoria asked, frowning. "You seem distant." "Just tired. The Morrison project is taking more than we expected." The lie came out easily, like so many other small evasions that had become part of his routine. He realized, with growing discomfort, that his relationship with Victoria was based more on convenience than truth. The next day, Saturday, Adrian went to the office, something he never did on weekends. He told himself he needed to review some important documents, but the truth was he needed space to think, away from the whirlwind of wedding preparations. The building was almost empty. Only a few dedicated employees and the security team were present. As he passed the communications department, he saw a light on. Sarah was there, poring over reports, her hair casually tied up, reading glasses on her face. She looked up, surprised to see him standing at the door. "Mr. Cole, I didn't know that." "Adrian," he corrected gently. "It's the weekend. Here I'm just Adrian." A comfortable silence settled between them. He approached, observing the documents she was working on. "Why are you here on a Saturday?" he asked. "I enjoy the silence," she answered honestly. "And you? Shouldn't you be—" She hesitated, without finishing the sentence. "Preparing for my wedding?" he completed with a sad smile. "Yes, I should." Sarah watched him closely, noticing for the first time the shadows under his eyes, the weariness that his impeccable posture couldn't hide. "You look exhausted." she commented, momentarily forgetting the hierarchies. And not just physically. Adrian stared at her, surprised by the insight. It was as if, for a moment, someone truly saw him beyond the carefully constructed facade. "You know what's the strangest thing about being who I am?" he said, sitting in the chair next to her. "Everyone thinks they know my life. It's in the magazines, the newspapers, the gossip websites. Adrian Cole, the brilliant heir, the perfect fiancé, but nobody asks if it's what I want." "And is it?" The simple question hit him like a blow. No one in years had asked that question. "No," he replied, the word coming out before he could restrain it. "It isn't." The look they exchanged contained an intimacy neither of them had experienced before, the mutual recognition of two souls who, for different reasons, had lived lives that were not entirely their own. On the morning of the wedding, Adrian woke up before dawn. He watched the groom's suit meticulously prepared on the hanger. Everything was ready. The ceremony in the botanical garden, the reception for 400 guests, the platinum wedding rings. He got up and walked to the window. The city was beginning to wake up, indifferent to his dilemma. He thought about his father, about Victoria, about the shareholders. He thought about the expectations he had carried since childhood, the carefully plotted path he had followed without question. Then he thought about Sarah, the unexpected kiss, the authenticity she carried like a natural gift. The answer, after all, was simple. He picked up the phone, typed a message to his lawyer and another to his assistant. He left the device on the table, grabbed the car keys, and left. Sarah was at home organising reports when the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, she felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Adrian was standing there in jeans and a simple shirt, so different from the corporate figure she knew, yet still unmistakably him. "What?" she began, confused. "Your wedding?" "There was no wedding," he said simply. "But why?" Adrian took a step forward, his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Because for the first time in my life I want to do something real, something impulsive, something that's not planned but feels right." He reached out, gently touching her face. "That kiss, that night," he continued. "It was the most genuine moment I've ever experienced. And I realized I can't go back to a life of appearances after having experienced something real." Sarah felt unexpected tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of recognition. As if finally someone saw her, not the methodical and predictable Sarah that everyone knew, but the woman inside her waiting to be free. "I'm tired of being afraid," she whispered, "of calculating every step, of living without truly living." He smiled, a smile unlike any she had ever seen on his face, open, genuine, almost vulnerable. "Then let's learn together," he said, before leaning in and kissing her. This time, there was no audience, no escape, just two people who, by chance or fate, found in a simple kiss the beginning of a true story. And there, on the threshold of her small apartment, with the morning sun filtering through the windows, Sarah knew that some rules are meant to be broken, and some mistakes are, in fact, the first steps in the right direction. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.